intended for listeners who are blind, have low vision, or have another print disability, which makes reading, holding a book, or turning a page difficult or impossible. The content is copyrighted by the respective publishers. For more information, please visit us on the web at nfradioreading.org.
Hello, this is Susan, and for the next hour, I'll be reading from the June 30th, 2024 issue of the New York Times Arts and Leisure section on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. First, I would like to read an article entitled Long To-Do List for the Boston Symphony. This is written by Joshua Barone, and he says, Chad Smith, the orchestra's new chief executive, embraces both tradition and innovation. Lenox, Massachusetts. I'm going to sound like such a dork, Chad Smith said, as he drove a golf cart around the grounds of Tanglewood, the Boston Symphony Orchestra's pastoral summer home in the Berkshires. I love Tanglewood so much. He stopped the cart and looked out beyond the manicured campus to rolling tree-covered hills and the still waters of Stockbridge Bowl. It reminded him, he said, of the environment at the prestigious Salzburg Festival in Austria. But Salzburg isn't attached to an orchestra and a music institute in any way. Tanglewood has been since its founding in 1940. This is the sense of innovation that is at the core of the Boston Symphony Orchestra, said Smith, who became the Boston Symphony's president and chief executive in the fall. The orchestra was not yet 60 years old, and it changed its identity again by becoming a symphony orchestra, a pops orchestra, and an educational institution. Gesturing to Stockbridge Bowl, he added, and it has a beach. What other orchestra has a beach? Smith has big plans for Tanglewood, whose Boston Symphony season begins on Friday, just as he has a long to-do list for the ensemble at home. History would suggest that he isn't just dreaming. He came to Boston from the Los Angeles Philharmonic, where for 2 decades he played a crucial role in building the orchestra's reputation as one of the most innovative, important ensembles in the country. Smith, 52, has risen through the ranks of the Philharmonic to become its chief executive in 2019. His departure was a shock to those Angelenos, and to some it signaled a crisis for the Philharmonic, which shortly before had found out that it was losing its starry maestro, Gustavo Dudamel, to the New York Philharmonic. The Boston Symphony was also in the state of crisis. It had seen a period of comfortable stability, even compliancy, under Mark Volpe's leadership for 23 years. And when he retired in 2021, he was succeeded by Gail Samuel, another Los Angeles Philharmonic veteran, who resigned after 18 months. We had gone through a lot of turmoil, said Barbara Hostetter, the chair of the Boston Symphony's board, so we decided that we no longer had the opportunity to look outside the box. We needed an experienced orchestra CEO. Hostetter knew Smith was encouraged to see his name on a search firm's short list of candidates. The Boston Symphony may have once shaped American classical music, but it had become old-fashioned compared to the country's other top ensembles. She thought that he might be exactly what it needed to recover, if not thrive. More recently, there's been an emphasis on tradition, Smith said, but innovation was the founding principle. In the first part of the 20th century, I don't know that there was an orchestra that commissioned a body of work as enduring as the BSO's. Smith visited Boston and met with Andres Nielsen, the orchestra's music director. They spoke about the necessity and the mission to embrace the tradition, Nielsen said, and to continue that, but bring it forward. By the end of his trip, Smith was, to his surprise, open to taking the job. I was comfortable with the arc of the work I had done in L.A., he said, and I was excited by the opportunity that this orchestra put in front of me. The BSO is probably the only other orchestra I would have left L.A. for. It's Smith's job to say things like that, but his feelings about the Boston Symphony came from personal history. Los Angeles may have been his home for more than 20 years, but he grew up in Pennsylvania before moving to Boston to study voice at the New England Conservatory and Tufts University. The Boston Symphony was the orchestra he heard as a student. He performed at Symphony Hall, and he was even a fellow at Tanglewood. He knows Boston well, and he knows that Boston isn't Los Angeles. Smith isn't looking to replicate his work at the Philharmonic, but elements of its spirit will inform the changes he has planned for the Boston Symphony. For example, he and his colleagues in Los Angeles tapped into the city's distinction as a creative center. And during the pandemic, streamed performances features included a conversation between Dudamel and the film director Alejandro Gonzalez Inarritu with the experimental opera company The Industry. The orchestra presented John Cage's Emphorias 1 and 2 at Sony Pictures Studio in Boston. On the other hand, is an academic center. And as the conductor, Thomas Wilkins, who holds a conducting post at the Boston Symphony and has worked with Smith at the Hollywood Bowl, said, "He's got the luxury of now living in one of the most intellectual towns in America, if not on the planet." Smith has already announced plans that tap into the city's concentration of academic institutions. Among them is the creation of the Boston Symphony Orchestra, Humanities Institute, an initiative to develop programming with people beyond the walls of Symphony Hall and beyond music. Orchestras aren't just about music, said the cellist Jojo Ma, who lives in the Boston area. At its best, an orchestra is a meeting place for ideas and democratic exchange for creating the shared meaning that makes our communities strong. This belief that music is service is in the Boston Symphony Orchestra's founding DNA, and it's a purpose that I see guiding the BSO today. The the Humanities Institute was unveiled in a wave of news that included the move of Nelson's contract to a rolling evergreen one and his added title as head of conducting at Tanglewood. Smith also founded a composing chair, which will be occupied by Carlos Simon starting this fall. Smith's leadership will trickle down to programming. He is especially interested in festivals that, he said, explore topics and trends in a way that are meaningful and over multiple years. But because of classical music's long planning cycles, his stamp won't be entirely felt on the orchestra's repertoire until the 2025 through 26 season. Still, he is already working with the Boston Symphony to shape its ethos and marketing. I'm being asked a lot, when will we get back to pre-pandemic, Smith said. In fiscal year 2023, attendance for Boston Symphony concerts was down 23% from 2019. We'll get there, but I'm aiming for something a lot healthier. We have to recenter audiences in our decision-making and retool programming. Part of that work is a fresh look at the subscription model that long provided financial security for orchestras, but which has failed in recent years. The pandemic just ripped the floor out, he said. It's a massive impact financially, but it's also a huge opportunity. In a subscription model, programs need to have broad appeal with a trusted formula. But if an orchestra shifts its focus to single-ticket sales, concerts can become more curated experiences, Smith said. A niche evening that wouldn't sell out 3 performances might find success as a one-night event, while a Rachmaninoff warhorse played by a star virtuoso might receive 3 or 4 shows. Targeted programming could allow for the kind of risk-taking that has been somewhat absent at the Boston Symphony. Smith said he hoped it would make for a kind of sandbox that artists could come and play in. People from the city's various communities say, or Simon in his composer role. Gabriela Ortiz, a composer whom Smith and Dudamel championed in Los Angeles and whose ballet score, Revolution Diamantina, is coming to the Boston Symphony next season, described Smith as a leader who is truly engaged with artists. In Los Angeles, she said, he sat in on many rehearsals of her new music, as many as he could, and they would talk about how to take classical music out of the concert hall. He was very aware that to expand the audience, you had to be open to risks and experiments, Ortiz said. That's why I believe LA is one of the orchestras that looks to the future. I don't know Boston yet, but Chad invited me. He wants to bring new voices. Ortiz's music was included in the Boston Symphony's concert for the city in May, a free event that brought in community organizations and young artists to share Symphony Hall's public spaces and its stage with the orchestra. The first concert for the city last year included a piano appearance by Boston's Mayor Michelle Wu. Before the concert, Smith ran up and down the stairs of the building to see pop-up performances and one room where children were invited to take up instruments themselves. He tried to scratch out some notes in a quarter-size violin. He posed with Nelson's, Wilkins, and Keith Lockhart, the music director of the Boston Pops, along with leaders of local organizations shouting, 1, 2, 3, say community, as their photo was snapped. During the main performance, he leaned against the wall and listened as students from Boston Arts Academy Tina Turner Revue sang Proud Mary, and the Boston Symphony played Samuel Coleridge Taylor's Violin Concerto with Nathan Amaral, a winner of the Sphinx competition for young musicians of color. The next day, Smith was on the road to Tanglewood, and during the drive, he said that he hoped for the Boston Symphony to develop a reputation as New England's orchestra, and he has ideas to add the region to its touring diet. But he also pointed out that the drive to Tanglewood from Boston was about the same as from New York, where a significant portion of the audience comes from every summer. We need to have a presence in both cities, he said. Recently, there have been Tanglewood billboards on the West Side Highway to Manhattan with a photo of Nelson's and the phrase, "Let Summer Sing." At Tanglewood, Smith is planning to restore 2 historical buildings. Saranac, the home of the influential Boston Symphony music director Sergei Kossovsky, and the theater where Britain's Peter Grimes had its American premiere in 1946. Both places have fallen into disrepair, but both have potential for the festival's future. Saranac, Smith said, will be used for faculty and fellow housing. The theater, once renovated, will provide a proper stage for opera and ballet, whether for new works or visits from international companies. I want Tanglewood, he said, to be the classical music destination for the world. The question, though, is when that will happen. Smith said that infrastructure followed mission and that the need to renovate the theater is not just about stewardship of that building, but a programmatic dead spot in our work. On a more practical level, he will work with the orchestra's board to list of changes that need to be made in Boston and the Berkshires. The Humanities Institute will start this fall, but reaching a consensus on other projects, he said, will take about a year. Internally, change is hard, Smith said, but change happens by making change. It's going to take investment and a lot of listening and experimenting, but now is when we have to take the big swings. You are listening to a reading of articles and features from the New York Times Arts and Leisure section on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. And now an article entitled "Retirement Simply Didn't Suit Her." Mavis Staples tried to quit, but the studio and road won out. This is written by Grayson Haver Curran. On a rainy April day in Chicago, Mavis Staples sat in the restaurant of the towering downtown Chicago building where she has lived for 4 years. For 2 hours, she talked about the civil rights movement and faith, and finally she mentioned her old flame, Bob Dylan. The singer-songwriter proposed to Staples after a kiss at the 1963 Newport Folk Festival. She hid from him during a show at the Apollo decades later, fearing he'd ask again. They've remained friends, even taking daily strolls during a 2016 tour together. She had heard rumors he would soon retire, finally wrapping his fabled never-ending tour. Staples knew he would hate it. "Oh, Bobby, he's got to keep on singing," Staples said. "I could handle it more than him. I will call him and say, 'Don't retire, Bobby. You don't know what you're doing.'" Staples speaks from experience. Late in the summer of 2023, soon after turning 84, she told her manager she was done. She had been on the road for 76 years, ever since her father, Roebuck Staples, known as Pops, assembled a family band when she was 8. The Staples Singers became a gospel fulcrum of the civil rights movement and later a force for bending genres, mixing funk, rock, and soul inside their spiritual mission, an all-American alchemy. The band's mightiest singer and sole survivor since the death of her sister Yvonne in 2018 and brother Purvis in 2021, Mavis remained in high demand, a historical treasure commanding thunderous contralto. Being an American and not believing in royalty, meeting her was the closest I'd ever felt, said Jeff Tweedy of Wilco, who marveled at her while watching The Last Waltz decades before he produced a string of her poignant albums. "I felt the same way when I met Johnny Cash, like meeting a dollar bill or bald eagle." A seemingly indomitable extrovert, Staples had deeply resented being homebound during the height of the COVID-19 pandemic. So she returned to the road with gusto, playing more than 50 shows last summer. But in July, she missed the end of a moving walkway in Germany and fell on her face. Was this, she wondered, the life she wanted? She'd previously mentioned retirement, but now she insisted. Her team planned a small string of extravagant farewells. What first felt like relaxation for Staples soon morphed into tedium. She loved watching Shark Tank and Judge Judy, with whom she exchanged adoring video messages, but this wouldn't satisfy her forever. Her balance was precarious, and she didn't like using her lucite cane. "Lockdown again. I would cry, man," she said, her voice cracking. "I was losing it. I would get so sad because I got nothing to do." Early that year, Staples had recorded a self-affirmation anthem called Worthy, with a team including the electro artist and songwriter MNDR. She decided to follow it with Human Mind, a demo her friends Hozier and Allison Russell dispatched a year earlier. Its lines about enduring and overcoming cruelty suggested her life's thesis, so she thought it might be her finale. But the producer, Brad Cook, enjoyed the session so much he prepared more instrumentals. Those songs by Tom Waits and Frank Ocean, Sparkle Horse and Kevin Morby, were weird, she joked, their structures strange, But she relished the challenge, her voice having broadened and softened like a steel structure pillowed with velvet. Just because I'm 85, they think I can't do it? I'll show 'em, she said, shaking with laughter. That made me feel really good. She plans to release her first album since 2019 next year. What's more, one of her best friends, Bonnie Raitt, reminded her that people needed to see her. Staples decided to return to the road not only for a star-studded 85th birthday celebration and 2 weeks in Europe, but also a July 4 rendezvous with Dylan in New Jersey. I told Mavis it's what we're supposed to be here to do, Raitt said in an interview. We were given this calling. Staples recognizes she is a living bridge between the United States' past struggles and present ones, having faced more of the country's challenges than most of her living contemporaries, especially as a black woman. Her father played music nearly until he died in 2000, days before turning 86. She has resolved to share her stories at least that long. My voice is my gift from God, she said, a small golden cross dangling above a sunbeam yellow sweater. If I don't use it, I'm abusing my gift. Staples does not like to be sad or tired in public. When she is down, the singer Nathaniel Rateliff noted in an interview, she will slip backstage long enough to recover. When she sighs, as when discussing presidential candidates or voting rights, she does so from the bottom of her lungs, as if she's been saving it. I try not to be around people because they can sense that something is wrong with Mavis when I'm not having fun or cracking jokes, she said. I hate for them to keep asking me what's wrong. I can't tell you what's wrong because it's within me. I've got to sit it out. Staples has seemed so overwhelmingly positive for so long that her mother, Ochelia, called her Bubbles. She considers it her middle name. She now takes bottles of bubbles on airplanes to entertain any children she encounters. Tickled by her own nickname, she bestows one upon most everyone she knows. Raitt is Bonnie Boo. Rateliff is Montana, her stand-in for a long expletive. Her smile commandeers her entire face, and her laugh shakes her 5-foot frame. Because her voice is so distinctive, we tend to forget there's an elegance and lightness in Mavis Staples, said the War and Treaty's Michael Trotter Jr. during a phone interview. I marvel at how she's maintained herself. She's here to drag us all along when we're tired, weak, and want to complain. Tanya Trotter, his wife and bandmate, compared meeting Staples to encountering John Lewis, especially how both will believe in right no matter how much wrong they've encountered in their decades of public service. Our eyes haven't seen what her eyes have seen, she said. For her to still have hope, even though it looks really bad, it gives me hope. Indeed, Staples has transubstantiated grief and pain into often joyous music and a story of perseverance her entire career. Her father, a Mississippi native who went to Chicago amid the Great Migration and toiled in slaughterhouses and construction, steadily committed his family band to the civil rights and peace movements of the 60s, becoming a confidant and friend to Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. They toured relentlessly through the Jim Crow South, the whole lot once arrested outside Memphis after they fled a gas station where the towering attendant hurled racist epithets at Mavis and attacked Pops with a crowbar. The Staple Singers didn't relent, and she remains proud of that commitment, especially when peers shirked social justice for celebrity. I would always wish that my friends would join me singing these songs, she said. If you could have gotten Smokey Robinson, The Temptations, Gladys Knight to sing some freedom songs, that would have helped immensely. Soon after Dylan's proposal, Staples instead married a Chicago mortician. It was a quarrelsome relationship that ended when she changed their apartment locks. I married an undertaker, and that was the worst. They didn't have no feelings, she said, deadpan. Their problems became the basis for Only the Lonely, her tender-hearted but defiant testimonial from 1970. She fell in love only once more, shacking with North Carolina bassist through the 70s, but never remarrying. One of her true regrets, she said, was never having children, but she has long found delight in her role as Auntie Mavis for Purvis's 5 children. And while working with Tweety, she became a surrogate mother to his wife, Susie, and grandmother to their kids, Spencer and Sammy. A drummer who has played on multiple Staples albums, Spencer finds inspiration in the way she loves her job. It brings her a huge amount of joy and fulfillment to do the thing of music, make somebody's life better, he said in an interview. She's more gifted at that than pretty much anyone. Still, her own losses have mounted. Alongside her family, many of her closest collaborators and friends, Pop's pal Curtis Mayfield, their neighborhood crony Sam Cooke, her singing mentor Mahalia Jackson, and her occasional rival Aretha Franklin are gone. The 2016 death of Prince hit especially hard. In 1987, at the height of his power, Prince became a Staples devotee, asking to meet at a Los Angeles show. Her popularity had flagged, but he wanted to write for her. Though the albums they made became mirrored as a record label turmoil, they proved that Staples was a calming singer and a personality capable of more than her legacy suggested. It presaged collaborations with Galizar, Run the Jewels, and Arcade Fire, plus albums with Tweety, M. Ward, and Ben Harper. Purvis broke the news of Prince's death when she arrived to perform at Coachella. She wanted to go home and cried until her set the next day. She delivered an ebullient monologue on stage, calling him the most beautiful spirit that I have ever met. Before teasing a bit of Purple Rain, the crowd clapping the rhythm. It helped, she said. I have had a lot of hard times, good times, but I make it through. Things don't seem as hard as they used to. She meant this only for herself, though many conditions have improved since the days of "Why am I treated so badly?" or "Respect yourself." She lamented that progress was not linear. She scowled about the end of Roe v. Wade, was vexed by a string of women recently sucker punched in Manhattan and lamented the black mother and daughter in Georgia accused of voter fraud. She once thought singing would change the world, but she now believes that's naive. I'm singing for me too, to set my soul free and to feel better about how I'm living, she said in a rush. If y'all don't want to hear it, get you some earmuffs. I'm going to sing for as long as the Lord allows me. I ain't coming easy. In a crowded backstage room at the Los Angeles area venue YouTube Theater in mid-April, Staples hovered above a birthday cake, emblazoned with her face, wielding a chef's knife. And for 3 hours, a dozen stars, including Rate, Jackson Brown, Nora Jones, Chris Stapleton, and Michael McDonald, had paraded onto the stage, mixing Staples songs with stories about her. And though she won't turn 85 until July 10th, her team had planned this birthday when she retired and appeared imminent. She'd had some cognac, so she was holding court. 85 might be the new 35, she said, but I tell you, I'm having more fun than I've ever had in my life. I got work to do, and I'll take all of you along with me. You are listening to a reading of articles and features from the New York Times Arts and Leisure section on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. And now continuing with Mavis Staples. She started talking about her parents and how they picked cotton near Mound Bayou, Mississippi. When a voice echoed that tiny town's name, she knew it was Taj Mahal, the blues legend seated feet away in a wheelchair. They began flirting, singing childhood love songs back and forth, and talking about getting spanked with switches. Staples and Mahal are two in a diminishing pool of performers still working in their 80s. The acolytes watched in stunned silence. This has been the best birthday out of all of my birthdays, Staples said when the revelry broke, and right now I will cut this cake. She cut until the theater's staff took the knife, then started passing out slices, never taking a whole piece for herself. Staples stayed until 1 a.m. until everyone had been thanked, fed, and blessed. A few weeks later, at home between shows, she was musing on the upcoming presidential election when she remembered that moment. I felt so much love in there. I thought about my family, this 8-year-old girl singing with her father on the living room floor, she said, voice quivering. And here I am in this great auditorium. These are the things that keep me going. You have to stay hopeful and have faith that things are going to get better. And now an article entitled Maverick Back in the Director's Saddle. Kevin Costner goes for broke with an epic 4-film series by Nicole Sperling. Oh, to have the self-confidence of Kevin Costner. There are few actors in the final chapter of their career who would turn down a consistent $1 million an episode payday to pursue the variances of the Wild West. Yet there are few actors who are as single-minded as Costner. For the 69-year-old star and director, who has made a career of taking the road less traveled, has embarked on what many would call a foolhardy quest to turn his long, percolating story of the settling of the West post-Civil War into 4 theatrical films. It's an endeavor he's undertaking with little support from Hollywood. No legacy studio wanted to finance his sprawling epic, and it's one that comes at great personal cost, both financially, with Costner investing $38 million of his own money, and professionally with his commitment to the films, causing a schism with the producers of Yellowstone, the television franchise that revitalized his career. There is no guarantee his grand experiment will succeed. Horizon, an American Saga Chapter 1, debuted on Friday, and in a highly unconventional move, Chapter 2 will hit theaters less than 2 months from now, on August 16th. Both features cost in the $100 million range. Warner Brothers is releasing the films in the United States, Canada, and some international territories in a service deal calling for Costner to play the marketing costs while collaborating with the studio on the creation of the marketing materials. Warner Brothers, according to a representative who was not permitted to speak on the record, has a small financial stake in the production of the first 2 films. The deal's structure means that should the movies backfire, there will be little financial downside for the studio, but much risk for Costner himself. But as he put it, letting go was never an option. He first commissioned the script back in 1988. He almost made it with Disney, but the 2 parties couldn't agree on a budget, and the movie didn't go forward. Then, instead of retooling one movie to fit the parameters of potential buyers, he and the screenwriter John Baird turned it into 4. To partly finance the films, he mortgaged a 10-acre piece of underdeveloped coastline in Santa Barbara that he owned since 2006. It's hard to fall out of love for me. I don't do that, he told journalists during the online debut of his teaser trailer in February, and added, "There's a lot of people out there that know I'm a little bit of a hardhead or something. When no one wanted to make the first one, I got the bright idea to make 4. So I don't know what's wrong with me." Costner declined to be interviewed for this article. Costner has been dreaming of Horizon since his breakthrough in Silverado in 1985. This was before Costner bet big on himself in Dances with Wolves, the 1990 epic he pursued in place of the hefty paycheck he would have received to play Jack Ryan in The Hunt for Red October, an offer he described to GQ magazine as more money than he had ever seen. The role went to Alec Baldwin. Instead, he gambled $3 million of his own money on his ability to direct a film about a Civil War soldier's relationship with a band of the Lakota tribe, the film that grossed $424 million worldwide and won 7 Oscars, including the Best Picture and Best Director prizes. Costner gave directing another go in 1997 with The Postman, an R-rated post-apocalyptic drama that also involved an investment of his own funds. That movie, which cost $80 million, earned only $20 million at the box office and landed him in director jail for a good number of years. And so it went for Costner, who continued toiling in Hollywood to greater and lesser success. In 2015, he also personally invested in the drama Black or White, a movie the New York Times described as timid but honorable. It earned $21.7 million at the box office. Costner chipped in $9 million and starred in the film opposite Octavia Spencer. But Horizon may be his biggest bet yet. The film was scheduled to go into production as Costner's star was rising again, this time atop Taylor Sheridan's Yellowstone franchise. He played the prickly patriarch John Dutton in television's most popular show. Something of a unicorn himself, Yellowstone saw its audiences grow during its last 4.5 seasons of the Paramount Network, and it earned Costner his third Golden Globe. Yet that relationship has now come to a bitter end because of a scheduling dispute between Costner and Sheridan, precisely because of the Horizon films. Sheridan told The Hollywood Reporter he was disappointed by Costner's departure, adding that it truances the closure of his character. In a statement, Paramount said, "While we had hoped that we would continue working with him, unfortunately, we could not find a window that worked for him. All the other talent and our production needs in order to move forward together." A source at the studio said that a shortened schedule was offered to Costner along with a hefty payday, but that he responded only with unrealistic and ever-changing demands. A representative for Costner said he had no comment. And when the second half of Season 5 begins airing in November, Costner will not be part of the Dutton Ensemble. He made it official in a video posted on Instagram on June 21st, saying that in the long 1.5 years of working on Horizon, he realized that he wouldn't be able to continue with Yellowstone, which he described as that beloved series that I love, that I know you love. Instead, he will be back in Utah filming the third installment of Horizon. It's unclear whether he has the money to finish the movie and whether anyone will bail him out, especially if the first movie doesn't perform at the box office. It's one of those weird things where it's not about the money, it's about believing in your story and the film that you want to make, said the actor Danny Huston, who played opposite Costner in Yellowstone and has been cast in the Horizon saga as a Civil War colonel. But it is about the money, he added with a laugh, because the dream is a rich one. Costner debuted Chapter 1 last month at Cannes, where it received a standing ovation. Yet critics have not been kind in early reviews. Time magazine called it curiously undistinguished, and The Hollywood Reporter deemed the near 3-hour film a clumsy slog, pointing out the uncomfortably long time it takes to add context to the portrayal of its few Native American characters. It is currently tracking to open at $12 million, a inauspicious start for an expensive film, but insiders at Warner Brothers believe the tracking services are not reaching Costner's audience for these films, primarily older men living in the middle of the country. Executives at the studio, which is selling tickets to the first 2 chapters at once, are hopeful that their marketing efforts will reach those audiences who don't often show up to the theaters, and they are counting on the prolonged return of Yellowstone to fuel more interest in Horizon. Huston, for one, is excited by the prospect. If this works, it opens up such an interesting world for filmmakers because then we can make these sagas. I believe that this has all the sense of adventure and gusto and a visually epic quality which can entice an audience to see it, and then see Chapter 2 and then see Chapter 3. Costner himself remains undeterred. I'm out there heading west again, pushing a rock uphill, trying to make the third one, he said in a trailer event. I know I'm a little bit of a joke, or it's maybe humorous to even watch me because it's like, whoa, I wonder when he's going to ever stop digging. I'm terribly satisfied in my own life that God allowed me to get these first two done, he said, and if I'm hit by lightning, who knows what happens? At least I went west. You are listening to a reading of articles and features from the New York Times Arts and Leisure section on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. And now under television, Alex Solosky has an article entitled A Princess of Comedy Shows a Dramatic Side. Abby Elliott, from a line of very funny people, stretches her talents in The Bear. Abby Elliott knows her way around a comedy. A veteran of the Groundlings and the Upright Citizens Brigade, she joined Saturday Night Live at 21 and has since appeared in laugh-track-ready shows like How I Met Your Mother and Odd Mom Out. So in the spring of 2021, when FX approached her about a pilot for a comedy, she was interested. I kind of went into it like, oh, should I do a voice, Elliot said? Or I could do a little catchphrase. That would be fun. That show was The Bear, which returned for its third season on Thursday. On Hulu, set largely in the fraught kitchen of a Chicago restaurant, it stars Jeremy Allen White as a troubled chef. Elliot appears as his forbearing sister. The Bear is a comedy only in the classical sense, in that it emphasizes human follies and does not end in disaster. In a workplace rife with panic, money trouble, and suicidal ideation, not a disaster? Take it up with Emmy voters who in January awarded its best comedy. Otherwise, it's a dramatic, extremely stressful event. I didn't really quite understand how high the stakes would be, she said. For what it's worth, Elliot does consider The Bear a comedy. It's just like real life, she said. A lot of people find comedy in the darkness and the stress, and it's so relatable in that way. But a funny thing happened on the way to the kitchen. The Bear made Elliot a dramatic actress. It does not do a voice. She does not do a voice. I met Elliot, 37, at an Upper West Side cafe on a summer morning. The sun set to low broil about a week before the season 3 premiere. Though she lives in Los Angeles and works in Chicago, she had to come to the East Coast for a family wedding and was enjoying a few days in the city. At breakfast, she was crisply dressed and fresh-faced. She had admit to a thick coat of self-tanner, despite the heat. She has big eyes, a sardonic closed-mouth smile, and a talent for instant intimacy, especially when describing how she spent the 2024 Golden Globes pumping breast milk backstage alongside a similarly postpartum Sarah Snook. If there is an alley for laughs, Elliot has it. Her father is Chris Elliott, a long-time late-night fixture seen more recently in Schitt's Creek, who spent a season on SNL. His father is Bob Elliott, half of the Greatest Generation comedy duo Bob and Ray, who appeared on an SNL special. Abby's mother, Paula Neidhart Elliott, is a former talent coordinator for David Letterman. Elliott doesn't feel that she was pushed into performance. Her father, whom she idolized, showed her that a showbiz life was possible, even desirable, but he never made her watch his appearances on Late Night with David Letterman, and he encouraged her to go to college. I mean, there were options, she said. I just didn't know how to do anything else, and I've never really known. She dropped out of college after a semester and relocated to Los Angeles, living with relatives and taking improv classes. And she was invited to SNL a few years later. Name recognition, a gentle form of nepotism, likely got her in the door at 30 Rock, but it was a gift for riotous celebrity impressions. Angelina Jolie, Meryl Streep, that kept her there. She left after 4 years on the show and worked steadily throughout the subsequent decade. Though typically in the kinds of daffy supporting roles that rarely ping the culture radar, she made peace with that. I was in such a safe zone of like, okay, well, this is just what I do, she said. And it's like, okay, I'm not going to be able to get these notes or play dramatic parts. Christopher Storer, the creator of The Bear, thought differently when he was searching for an actress to play a loving, no-nonsense sister. He had never worked with Elliott before, but he remembered her from SNL, particularly her impressions. There was something so genuine, he said, that you could just feel the affection for the people that she was impersonating. If The Bear has made Elliott a better actress, it has not made her a better cook, though the food in the show prepared by Storer's sister, Courtney Storer, is apparently excellent. The piccata Natalie makes in the show's second episode, well, Elliott wrapped it in a plastic bag and ate it in the van on the way home. I would love to cook, Elliott said, but I'm barely showering every day. It's all air fryer and Target orders. You've been listening to a reading of articles and features from the June 30th, 2024 issue of the New York Times Arts and Leisure section. Your reader has been Susan, and thank you for listening.
following program is intended for listeners who are blind, have low vision,